earlier this week, the U.S. Treasury Department shortened its list of electric vehicles eligible for tax credits in line with its Inflation Reduction Act. As widely expected, South Korean auto giants were not included in the list. But what does that mean? Joining me here in the studio is our trade correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Welcome, Ha-young.
Great to be here, Dami.
Ha-young, first off, let's talk about the list itself. Which company is included and not included? And also the current state of global automakers, including the ones from South Korea.
Well, under the Act, 16 electric vehicle models are eligible for subsidies of up to $7,500. And that list has been whittled down from over 40 EV models after EV battery requirements got stricter, in addition to requirements that final assembly be done in North America. And all the selected models are American-made, including Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y, and Ford's E-Transit and Mustang. And as you just mentioned, Hyundai and Kia failed to put their name on the list. And although Hyundai's Genesis GV70 is manufactured at the company's Alabama plant, it was also excluded as its EV batteries are made in China. But they weren't the only ones. Companies from Japan and most of the firms in Germany were excluded from the list.
That's right, because on Thursday, Volkswagen was added to the list as the first foreign car for that bill. But for now, South Korea's exclusion from the list implies a loss of price competitiveness in the global auto market. Then what's the expected impact on local automakers?
Right, Dami, this is concerning for South Korean firms as their U.S. counterparts will have a head start in the EV market. But some says that it is not the worst situation for South Korea. Rather, it could be seen as an opportunity as there are about 70 different EV models being sold in the U.S. and global automakers are now on the same page. Let's take a listen.
It's a good chance for South Korea, as global automakers now have to compete only based on the quality of their products. We have an advantage over global competitors, as South Korean electric cars have been recognized by the global market, with winning 3 awards this year.
Besides, he added that there are ways to minimize the damage by targeting the commercial vehicle market, such as through leased vehicles that are not subject to the U.S. EV bill. And in case of Hyundai Motor, it is accelerating the construction of its EV factory in Georgia, which will be completed in 2025. But uncertainty still lingers as the company will need to use the time between now and then to work on meeting the battery requirements.
Now, Ha-young, speaking of the battery requirement, can you walk us through what that means and also its impact on local battery makers?
Well, the regulation, which was announced at the end of last month, includes details of critical minerals and components used in batteries. And to elaborate on that, if more than 50% of battery parts are manufactured and assembled in North America, a subsidy of $3,750 will be given. An additional subsidy of $3,750 is given when more than 40% of the key minerals are mined or processed in the U.S. or FTA countries. So in this case, South Korea is also one of those countries. The uncertainty has been greatly relieved as it's expected that local battery makers won't need to change their current manufacturing processes.
Since we don't have enough resources, we can't extract the major minerals for battery production. The latest requirements imply that even if South Korea processes those minerals, it can still qualify for tax credits. However, uncertainty still lingers as the details of tax incentives for automakers have not been announced yet.
And another uncertainty is that starting in 2025, an eligible EV may not contain any critical minerals extracted or processed by a foreign entity of concern. And more than 70% of the critical minerals used by South Korean battery firms like lithium are processed in China, which is expected to be on the list, causing South Korea to diversify its supply chain.
Then, with the Inflation Act emerging as a key agenda item at the Yoon-Biden summit next week, can we expect a breakthrough? What do you think?
Well, recently, Seoul's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho met U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and requested that she pay attention to concerns that South Korea firms have about the bill. And such efforts are important as exports are crucial to South Korea's economy. And in fact, car exports account for more than 15% of total exports. And with the remaining issues in mind, the government may convey its concern and stance during the summit with President Biden. Let's take a listen.
It is important to secure a time extension until South Korea can reduce its dependence on Chinese minerals for batteries. It would also be great if the government could convey that there is a contradiction between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Free Trade Agreement, as it could amount to discrimination against a product manufactured outside the US.
While delivering concerns, it is also important to focus on positives, for instance, viewing the IRA as among measures to strengthen bilateral cooperation on the battery supply chain.
Meanwhile, more than 100 business leaders will be accompanying President Yoon on his trip to the U.S., and the Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs hinted at the possibility of addressing the Inflation Reduction Act if the two leaders feel the need for comprehensive cooperation measures.
Right. The talks on the act turn out to be fruitful, hopefully, so that they can ease the burden off of the local automakers.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Ha-young.
My pleasure.